Welcome back to another episode of Autism Family Life, bringing you all things autism, family, and life in 30 minutes or less. In this week's episode, after two kind of ranty episodes busting myths and getting into things that parents, or at least that this parent is sick of hearing, I want to bring it back into another one of those encompassing episodes that touches on the autism, the family, and the life. And in this episode, I want to talk to you about our experience and our situation with eloping, and not in the running off to get married, in the wandering. And the reason I want to talk to you about this is because it's a very much part of my story. And it's not always one that I like to talk about because it is a very uncomfortable story for me to tell. But it needs to be out there and I need to talk about it. Before we get into it, though, I would like to remind you to please leave a review for the podcast and to subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, or Spotify, or Google Play, or Apple Podcasts. So for wherever it is that you are listening in, please don't forget to subscribe so you can get updates. And if you are watching on the YouTube channel, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get your updates there. Now, as I said in the beginning, this episode is one of those episodes where I'm going to try to weave all of the autism, the family, and the life in. On some episodes, I focus more on an autism thing. On some episodes, it's more of a family thing. On other episodes, it's more of a life thing where we talk, about the self-esteem or the reclaiming yourself as a woman. And, on the family ones, okay, so we might share a couple personal stories. And on the autism, we get more into, initial diagnosis, or for the past couple of weeks when we were talking about the myths about autism and the things that this parent is sick of hearing. So for this episode, as I said, I want to tie in all aspects of the autism, the family, and the life, and I want to talk to you about our family's experience with my daughter's wandering. And to set this stage, I would like you to picture this. So you're waking up on a Saturday morning and you just have this feeling that something is not quite right. You can't quite pinpoint it yet, but you have this gut feeling that something is just not right. So immediately after you wake up, you go downstairs, and instead of seeing your daughter waiting on the couch for you to go get her breakfast, you notice that your front door is very slightly open. And it's that little bit of something that's off that immediately sends you into panic mode. So you run back upstairs and you're searching from room to room to room. It does not matter whose room it is. You are searching the rooms. You're opening the doors and you're running into the rooms. You're checking under the beds. You're checking in the closets. You are checking every which where for your child. And then when you go back downstairs, you take note of the open cabinets in the kitchen where there might be a trail of cereal or there might be a trail of flour, because sometimes your daughter gets into that stuff too. But that's all you see. You don't see her. So you keep checking, and then you check the backyard because maybe she's back there. Maybe she's playing in the play fort up there, or maybe she's playing near the car, or maybe she's playing in the backyard. But she's not there. And then when you finally go back upstairs and you check your child's bedroom, where she rarely sleeps, because she's been sleeping with you since she was about 4 or 5 after she got a cold, and then that became her typical routine, you go back into her room and you notice her very unmade bed. And that's when this realization hits you full force. Your child is not in your home. Your child is not in the backyard. Your child's not in the attic. Your child's not in the basement. Your child has wandered off, and you don't know where. Wandering in autistic children happens far more often than we think, and it's become almost commonplace when we see these stories on the news that the child has wandered away to a source of water. Unfortunately, that usually means that children have drowned in the water because they don't always have those strong swimming skills. And as I just related to you, I am a mom of an autistic child who has wandered. It has happened twice in our lifetime, or 3 times in our lifetime. The first time was the preface to the story. That was what I was just telling you about. It was waking up on that Saturday morning because knowing that something just wasn't quite right. And there was something telling me that just something was wrong. At the time, my daughter was sharing the bed with, we co-slept because, like I said, when she was like 4 years old, she had like a really bad fever or bad cold. So she slept in our bed because it helped her feel better. And then that just became part of her routine. So she kept sleeping in our bed. And usually in the morning, when she would wake up before us, she would get up, she would go downstairs, and then she would wait on the couch, and she had her favorite Cookie Monster toy with her. Sometimes she would get into either a box of Bisquick or she'd get into cereal, but she was always waiting on the couch for someone. But this particular morning, something was just dreadfully, dreadfully wrong. So when I got downstairs, expecting to see her sitting on the couch waiting for me, and then when she wasn't there, it was then that I saw like the slightly open front door. And here's the thing too, is that the door wasn't even like wide open. It was just like a tiny crack open. And at the time, we had a chain lock on the door and a key for the front door. Because it needed to be, and it's still this way, it needed to be locked both from the inside and from the outside. And at that time, the key, so the chain lock on the door, though, was low enough that my daughter could reach it. And it didn't take much for her to be able to turn the key. Now, my daughter is a very observant person, and she's also very capable of problem-solving things. So for example, to reach the Bisquick in the cabinet, she opened up our dishwasher, climbed up onto the dishwasher, opened one of the drawers in the dishwasher to climb up onto the counter, and that's how she got to the cabinets. So she's very resourceful. And again, like I said, she's very, very observant. So she knew that she had to undo the lock in order to get outside. But most of the time, in the past, as long as someone was awake and downstairs with her, she wouldn't go towards that lock, she wouldn't go towards that door. But at this particular moment in time, whatever was motivating her, and I'm pretty sure I knew, she decided that she was going to go. And that was when I began my frantic search from room to room, and just kind of thinking, all right, so maybe she just opened the door and then she just didn't go outside. Hopefully that's what was going on here. And even, in the back of my head, there was a voice saying, like, that couldn't possibly be true. And so that spurred my actions further, though, the looking from room to room, checking in the backyard, and checking every possible, running through all possible situations and scenarios in my head before fully coming to the sinking realization that my daughter was gone, that she had left the house early that morning. I don't really even know what time. So I went back upstairs. I woke up her father, and he started searching through the neighborhood, and I called the police. And it was actually once I got on the phone, despite the fact that my hands were shaking and that I was crying, my fears started to subside just a little bit. Because in the background, as I'm talking to the police officer, I could hear my daughter. I know the noises that she makes, and that was the noise. That was her noise. That was my daughter. You might even be able to hear her in the background while I'm recording this podcast episode. So I was then able to, really describe her in detail to the officer on the phone, And then we went down to go to the police station to go get her. So we were told that they had been about 5 minutes away from making a major announcement on the news that there was a missing child at the police station. And we were told that she was found near the McDonald's about 2.5-ish blocks from our house. Maybe not a big deal, as you might be thinking, but in order to get to this McDonald's from our house, you have to cross an extremely busy intersection. So I don't know, again, I'm not sure what time she got out of the house. I don't know what the traffic was like, but I knew that she was able to get there on her own, completely unscathed, more than likely because she wanted French fries. Because we used to walk to this McDonald's quite a bit, because she loves the French fries and the side salads. So she was hungry. That was what was motivating her. She wanted to go get French fries and her side salad. So she left the house by herself. And we were very, very lucky that nothing happened to her and that someone found her when they did. Because I can't even fathom, what all the things that could have happened to her, the things that could have gone wrong. And after that particular incident, we stopped walking to that McDonald's. The second time that it happened was a similar situation, but it was 4 years later. So these happened for her in about 4-year spurts. So the first time it happened, she was about 8 years old. The second time it happened, she was 12 years old. At that time, her father and I were separated. And I would spend the week with my fiance, the one I live with now, my younger daughter's father. And my autistic daughter was at home with her father. And it was once again one of those situations where she was just kind of guided by her stomach. So she went to the McDonald's only to be found by a very good Samaritan. That person brought her to one of the local hospitals, and I got a phone call in about maybe 2 o'clock in the morning from her father saying that she had gotten out and she was missing. Not long after I got off the phone with him, I got a phone call from Child Protective Services informing me that unless I was able to find a family member for my daughter to stay with, that she was going to be put into temporary emergency foster care. And I started to panic and my heart was sinking, because why in the world would you think that putting her into, and not that I'm doubting the foster care system, but to put her into emergency foster care with potential family or potential parents, individuals who don't know autism, who don't know nonverbal autism, what in the world? So like I said, at the time I was pregnant, and I also had to be at work the next day, so I was kind of exhausted on my feet. But I did the best that I could. I called my mom to come get her from the hospital, and she did. And there was just this whole mess that we had to deal with Child Protective Services, which was an absolute living nightmare. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, having to deal with CPS. It's a nightmare. It really is. And then the next time it happened, as I said, these things come in 4-year spurts. My daughter is now 18, so it happened when she was 8, it happened when she was 12, and then it happened again when she was 16. When she was 16, I was in the house again. By this point, her father and I were divorced. We were divorced. And he hadn't been living there for almost 3 years, 2 years now, 3 years. And I heard her getting out of her room and going downstairs and trying to open the door. We had moved the chain lock up so that she couldn't reach it. And the key that was required to unlock the door was kept in my room. My fiance and I. So But at that time, like I said, I could hear her opening up her door and walking past our bedroom and then going downstairs. And since then, we have, done a few more things to make sure that the house is safe. So we have, like alarm sensors on the doors and on the windows. We are looking into doing angel sense. And I also keep, kind of like these laminated ID cards for her that they go into her shoes, because she puts her shoes on whenever she goes downstairs. And I've also gotten into the habit of filling out this sheet that says, what does my child look like at night? So that way I can say, she's wearing this, this, and this, or she has, like these particular birthmarks, or distinctive facial features, or anything like that. So that way, if we ever find ourselves in the situation again where I have to speak with law enforcement officials, or emergency officials, emergency responders, I can tell them exactly what she's wearing, and I can tell them that she's this tall, or she weighs this much, or this is what she looks like. Again, not that I can't do that without that information written down, but having that information written down just takes some of that panic out of the situation. So this, again, two situations, the twofold part of this that I would not wish on anybody. The first is actually having to deal with the wandering issue in the first place, because that instilled this kind of like fear in me of going anywhere and taking her places, because I didn't want to run the risk of her bolting from me and me not being able to find her in a crowd. And then the second piece of it is having to deal with Child Protective Services. I understand fully, of course, that they are just trying to do their job. But there's a time and place for CPS to get involved. And when a child wanders from your home, that is not the time or place for CPS to get involved, because you are just adding this unnecessary and undue stress to an already incredibly stressful, intense situation. If you have a similar story to share, or you have tips for how to best manage these situations, I would absolutely love to hear them. In the show notes for this show, you can leave a comment on it. You can also read about our story. I'm also providing a copy of those printable ID cards that you can use for home purposes, and then also the sheet that I use to describe my child, so like her facial features, her body type, what they're wearing. So you can find all those linked in the show notes for this show. And I would, like I said, if you have a similar story to share, feel free to leave one in the comments on the show notes or in a comment on the YouTube video. I would love to have ended this show on a more lighter note, but again, this is one of those episodes where it was all things autism, family, and life. Sometimes these episodes are a little bit more lighthearted, sometimes they're a little ranty, and then sometimes they're a little bit more serious. And this was one of those episodes that just ended up being a little bit more serious because it had to be. Because this was something that so many parents of autistic children deal with. So many of us have kids who bolt or who wander, and sometimes they don't come back. I don't want your child to be one of those statistics. I don't want you to go through what I went through, waking up frantic and not knowing that my daughter was in her bed or that she was at home. I don't want you to wake up and not have your child by your side. I don't want you to go through that fear, to go through that anxiety, and to go through that living nightmare of not knowing where your child is or if you're ever going to see them again. I don't want you to go through that. I will see you on next week's episode, and I hope you have a blessed day.